now, a very warm welcome to everyone who's joined us for today's Birthday Bash Masterclass Ancient Carving Secret Messaging in the Ancient World, led by Dr. Martina Diepenbroek. I'm Parthika and I will be your SASA host for today. Firstly, what is SASA? SASA stands for Save Ancient Studies Alliance. It works to promote the study of the ancient world and engagement with our human deeper past. Building a grassroots movement through outreach, collaboration, accessibility, and public scholarship, we work towards our goal of inspiring a wide inclusive community of scholars, learners, and students. We have various educational resources on our website that you can check out. You can find us on all major social media platforms by just looking up Save Ancient Studies. A few housekeeping rules before we get started. Please be kind and respectful. Listen and ask thoughtful questions throughout the event. Please be patient with technology and those administering it. Our live events are live streamed on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook, and they are recorded and archived on those platforms. And most importantly, have fun. As I mentioned, this event is part of our Birthday Bash fundraiser. So please support SASA by making a donation. And you can also support your favorite triathlete by submitting their name while making your donations. If you enjoy our events, please also consider becoming a supporter of SASA with a recurring monthly donation. For as little as $3 a month, you can help us save ancient studies. Thank you for joining us again. I'll now hand it over to Martina.
Thank you so much, Parthika. Welcome. It's great to have so many of you joining us on the live platforms. This is going to be a very interactive session. I'm sure we're going to make it very fun. It will be partly a presentation, but there will also be several activities. We're going to look at various types of ancient writing systems and ancient carvings. And all along the way with the various activities, we shall also try to solve a murder mystery related to an ancient story that goes back to about 800 BC. So yes, we're going to start. Let's see, and then yes, we're going to start, and then yay, yes, that is it. If there are any questions or comments or anything at any point, please do share anything in the chat, of course, because there are the various social media channels where you can add your questions and comments. We shall keep checking all of this throughout the course of these about 1.5 to 2 hours during the masterclass. So welcome. We're going to look at some ancient carvings, how to write your own secret messages in ancient scripts. And like I said, part of it is also a sort of murder mystery. You might know some things like murder mysteries and escape rooms and such as a sort of actual games. We made a sort of online variant, and I hope you will all enjoy it. Along the way, we shall also look into a number of ancient scripts, and hopefully that will be fun and interesting for all of you. But like I said, this is going to be very interactive, so please share any questions or comments at any point. My name is Martina, and welcome to this masterclass on ancient carvings. Let me share the program fast to explain a bit about how it works. We shall start with a background story on Homer, who was a poet from the 8th century BC from Greece, who wrote a story about the hero Bellerophon. And Bellerophon, at some point, was carrying his own death sentence, hidden in a secret tablet, in a secret message. So we're going to look at that first. And then we're looking at various types of ancient scripts. Along the way, you will be able to try to write your own name, say in cuneiform or in hieroglyphics. And we shall also try to use, we shall also try to write on something like some sort of wax tablets. But yeah, we shall have some modern variations, of course. So yeah, for the course of this masterclass, try if you can to just get a pen and paper, maybe pencils, and for example, something like clay, or maybe you have a bar of soap, to get an idea of what it is like to carve into wax tablets. Because back in the day, the Greeks and the Romans, they would use wax tablets. We don't have those, of course. You could go to some museums where they make the reconstructions and sell them, but yeah, where many of you probably won't have an actual wax tablet. If you have one, please do take a picture and add it in the chat and via any of the channels that you are joining. Yeah, but for everyone else, please do try to get a pen and paper and some pencils for now. I shall give you a few minutes to get those materials together. Also, if you'd like to participate in the later activity with the ancient carvings, maybe if you have something like a bar of soap or clay, maybe you have something like Play-Doh in the house, you can take it. And then if you also have the bar of soap and the, sorry, if you also get the bar of soap and the clay, then you can maybe look for something like a needle or a pen, but then without actually opening the pen so that the stick with the ink comes out, because we're going to carve into the clay or the wax. Yeah, so see if you have any of these materials around. I shall give you a moment. While in the meantime, I also explain a bit more about what we're going to do. So we're going to look at an ancient story, which is a sort of murder mystery, because a lot has been written about this part of the story. Many scholars looked into this passage from the poet Homer, but there's still a lot of discussion about what he exactly wrote. What kind of secret or ancient engraved message was it? And today in the masterclass, we shall try to, solve the riddle. All right. I hope that most of you have at least found a pen and paper, or maybe a pencil and the paper. So yeah, let us begin and have a look. Yes, and there we also have the clay. So pen and paper, pencils, and then maybe something like clay and bars of soap is what we will use. Don't worry if you don't have all of those materials right at hand. If you just have a pen and paper, you can always just try to draw the various characters of the various ancient alphabets onto your pieces of paper. Yes, because this is via live stream channels, if you like, please do post some photos of your drawings, of your creations, because we'd like to see what you did in the end. Right, let us first have a look at Homer. Who was Homer, and what is the story of Bellerophon that we're going to look at? I'm sure many of you in the audience have heard of the poet Homer. Homer was an ancient Greek poet who lived in the 8th century BC. There is quite a bit of discussion on who Homer was exactly. Was there one figure known as Homer, or was there one figure known as Homer, and did he write the whole story that we are looking at? It's been more or less presumed by many scholars, by many ancient scholars, ancient historians, and also scholars back in the day, that Homer wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey, two very large epics, is what we call them, very large works about adventurous figures, including Achilles, Prince Paris of Troy, Hector, Odysseus. I'm sure you've heard of some of these stories. Special figures like Achilles are very famous from, say, the movie Troy, and so is the figure Odysseus, who is also the main character in the Odyssey, who is the second epic. There is a lot of discussion these days, however, on who Homer actually was. Was there one person, Homer, who wrote all these stories, these two very long stories? What is believed these days is that over time, many of the stories that Homer brought together into one novel were already there. For many generations, one generation after the next, we see that stories were passed on orally from one generation to the next. And their stories are all related to the Trojan War. We know that in what is now Western modern Turkey, it was called Ionia to the Greeks back in the day, there was actually a major battle, a major war around the year 1200 BC. And we know that now from mainly archaeological excavations, but also looking into textual remains from back in the day. So after this war, many stories started to develop over time. And those were mainly mythological stories, stories in which gods and goddesses played a very major role. Because the gods and goddesses were very important to the Greeks back in the day. Some of the major Olympic gods and goddesses were, say, Zeus, Poseidon, Poseidon, Hera, Athena, Aphrodite, and there were many more. If anyone has a favorite Greek god or goddess, please share in the chat, and of course, we shall also comment on your reactions. Does anyone have a favorite Greek god or goddess? Yeah, please share it with us on the various platforms. So the stories over time, the stories about this actual historical war became more and more mythical over time. With one generation after the next, the stories became bigger, greater in very many ways, more mythological. And very many elements were added that were not really part of the actual war. So how it is described in the Iliad and the Odyssey wasn't literally how it happened during that war, but we know that around 1200 BC there was a war around a place that has been now identified as the ancient city of Troy. So these stories over time started developing further and further. And in the 8th century BC, there was a figure called Homer who brought all these stories together into two large epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey. The Iliad is mainly the story about the Trojan War, and then the Odyssey, the second part, is the story of Odysseus, one of the heroes in the Greek army, one of the Greek leaders, in fact, who after the Trojan War went on his own quests for 10 years before he made it all the way back home. So the Iliad, Ilion in Greek means the city of the horses. Ilion was a different name for the city of Troy, because the city of Troy was protected by the god Poseidon, and Poseidon was the god of the seas and waters. That's what he is mainly known for, but also a god related to horses and horsemanship. So Ilion, the city protected by Poseidon. And the Trojan War was a war between Troy and a number of Greek city-states that go all the way back to mythical times. So the way in which it is described in the novel is that it basically really goes all the way back to mythical times, long before there were official written stories. But now we know that what Homer described was actually based on a real historical war about 400 years before his time. If anyone has any ideas, any questions about the Iliad, or any things they already know they would like to share, then of course, please let us know anytime. And Pathika, if you can see any questions or comments, you can also share it, of course. Thank you. Yeah, so this war was between Troy and a number of Greek city-states, and it goes all the way back to mythical times. The war broke out because Prince Paris of Troy was a sort of womanizer figure. Priam, his father, so the king of Troy, had over 100 children, is what the story tells us. Sorry, so over 100 children. Can you imagine having over 100 children? I'm sure many of you might have one or two children, or maybe you will still have children in the future at some point, and you may consider, say, one or two probably. But imagine having 100 children. I'm sure that must have been very tough for King Priam, especially with some of them, like Paris, who were being real womanizer figures. At some point, Paris and his elder brother Hector, with a few other of the Trojans, formed a delegation, and they went to the ancient Greek city of Sparta. Sparta was the kingdom of King Menelaus, together with his wife, Queen Helena. Helena was the most beautiful woman in the world. That is how she is described in the mythological stories. Because all these figures that we discuss, say Paris and Priam and Helen, Agamemnon, Menelaus, and also here Bellerophon, the figure that we shall get to a bit later, they're all mythological figures. None of them were actual historical figures. Yeah, so what happens when Paris and Hector and the rest of the delegation made it to Sparta? Paris immediately fell in love with Helena, who was the most beautiful woman in the world. Helena wasn't so happy in Sparta, being married to King Menelaus, an angry old man, so much older than she was. But over time she had learned to sort of adjust to it, and she was fairly happy with her life. Yet when she saw Prince Paris, she also immediately fell in love with him, and the two decided to run away together. So Paris smuggled her out of the palace, took her back on the ship to Troy, and when they were about to reach the shores, of Troy, what is now the modern Western Turkey, that's when he took Helena out of the hull of the ship. She came up, and Hector was shocked when he saw it. He told his younger brother off, "What have you done? You abducted Helena of Sparta. She is such a powerful, well-known figure." But Paris said that another story once told him that Aphrodite had promised him the most beautiful woman in the world, and that was Helena of Sparta. So when their paths crossed, they had to come together and leave together. So Helena was taken to Troy, where she then became known as Helen of Troy, and she is better known under that name. So Helena of Sparta became Helen of Troy. Menelaus, the husband of Helena, was of course very angry when he figured that his wife was abducted. He went to Agamemnon, his elder brother, who was one of the commanders of the joint Greek forces, and he urged his brother, "Please let us go together with all the joint Greek forces, because I want my wife back." All the Greeks joined forces, something that didn't happen very often back in the day, because Greece was divided into a number of so called city states or polis, all with their own small armies, their own ideas, and things like that. But once in a while, all the Greeks would join forces, and that is what happens in this story. And the joined Greek forces move all the way to Troy, where they then fight a 10-year war. And Homer's Iliad actually starts towards the end of this war. It describes the last few days of the war, but with a lot of back and forth in the story, of course, because it's a very long story that more or less explains everything that has happened during the Trojan War. But the main focus point are the last few days. One of the figures, one of the heroes, and a hero is a figure who goes on quests to defeat monsters and such. Still very much like a hero figure is nowadays. One of those hero figures was called Bellerophon. And we see him here in, on the statue, where he is riding Pegasus, a winged horse. You might have heard of Pegasus. He appears in different movies and series. Say, for example, the animation Hercules. That's where he appears. But we also see him appear in various other stories. With Bellerophon seated on the flying horse, with a spear, his cape, and the well-known Greek helmets from back in the day. How Homer describes it is in this way. Bellerophon came from a city called Ephyre in the heart of Argos. Argos was one of the city-states in Greece back in the day, with pasture land of horses, and there dwelt Sisyphus, that was the craftiest of man, Sisyphus, who was a son of Aeolus. You might have heard of Sisyphus. At some point, he made the gods so angry that they sent him to the underworld, where he had to push a rock up a slope all day, every day. But when he almost reached it, he would always drop it in a way, or his hands got too slippery. The stone would roll back again, and he had to start all over again. That was his eternal punishment for not following the rules of the gods. Sisyphus had a son Glaucus, and Glaucus then had another son, Bellerophon. So Bellerophon is related to Sisyphus. Sisyphus made the gods so angry at some point, like I said, that he was sentenced to lifelong punishment in the underworld. And what we see in a lot of Greek myth, that when something like this happens to one family member, things usually also don't go so well for many of the other following generations or other family members, if it is within the same generation. And that is what we shall see here, because even though Bellerophon is a great, mighty warrior, a great hero, some things will happen to him that, don't go exactly as he had planned it. To Bellerophon, the gods granted beauty and lovely manliness, so he was a young adult, he was strong and powerful, and very much loved by all the gods. Again, if anyone has a favorite god or goddess, or maybe another favorite character from the Iliad or the Odyssey, if you know the stories, then please share it with us. But Proteus in his heart devised against him evil, and drave him, seeing it was mightier far from the land of the Argives. King Proteus, king of another neighboring kingdom, didn't like Bellerophon so much, He believed that Bellerophon became too pretty, too powerful. Young women loved him, would follow him. And he was very well known in his kingdom as a benefactor, as a very kind figure. And Proteus, the figure and the king of one of the neighboring kingdoms, actually, in a way, saw that as a threat because he believed maybe Bellerophon would also be interested in my kingdom. Maybe he wants my daughter, and then what is going to happen? And then the wife of Proteus, fair Anthea, lusted madly for Bellerophon, because one day Bellerophon made it to the court of King Proteus, to the neighboring kingdom, which is actually part of one of the Near Eastern kingdoms. So he had left Greece to go on a journey, because many of the heroes at some point go on a journey, like a quest, feeling they have to leave their hometown to go and defeat monsters, for example, like Odysseus did, or Hercules believed that his quest was to find out who his real parents were, because he was of divine descent. Hercules is a son of Zeus, but he was raised by a mortal couple. And so we see that Bellerophon also at some point believes that he has to leave his hometown to go on this quest. And then when he ends up in the lands of Proteus, fair Anthea, the wife of the queen, the wife of the king, is lusted madly for Bellerophon to lie with him in secret love. So she is one of the very many women who are very interested in the woman, who are very interested in Bellerophon, sorry. You may think that doesn't really make much sense, because Anthea, she is already married to the king, so they must be much older than Bellerophon already. However, girls back in the day in ancient Greece were usually married off to much older men when they were around 12 to 15 years old. So when we are just about to start high school these days, basically, that is when girls back in ancient Greece were already married off, usually to men who were much older. Women were also seen as a sort of property. They were the property, first of all, of their father or an uncle or an elder brother or so, in case the father had passed away. And once they were married off to the husband, so into the other family, they then became the property of their husbands. So Anthea probably wasn't so much older than Bellerophon, actually, if we would think about it in that way. And at least anything and everything is always possible in mythological stories. So we shouldn't make too much of a point of such details. And we see that Anthea was one of those many women who loved Bellerophon. But you could no wise prevail upon wise-hearted Bellerophon, for that his heart was upright. He went to her and she went to him and she said, I like you, I want to be with you. And he said, no, I can't do that because you're already married. There were other stories, similar stories that we see from back in the day. Think, for example, of the biblical story of Joseph in Egypt. At some point, Joseph is sold as a slave to Potiphar, a sort of, basically, we would say real estate agent, sort of builder back in the day. And Potiphar's wife seduces Joseph, but he also keeps refusing, saying, no, I don't want this. You're already married. You're much older than me. And I just want to leave and go back home. What the lady there then does is make accusations that are untrue. And then Joseph ends up in jail. And sadly for Bellerophon, that is what we see here as well. Sorry. So Queen Anthea made a tale of lies and spoke to the king. She went to her husband and she said, Either die thyself or slay Bellerophon, saying he was minded to lie with me in love against my will. So she turned the whole story around. She said, um, she went to her husband, lying about the fact that she wasn't the one who wanted to be with Bellerophon. She now turns it around, saying, he came to me against my will. So she spoke, and wrath got upon the king to hear that word. And to slay Bellerophon, Proteus forbear, for his soul had awe of that. But Proteus sent Bellerophon to Lycia. So Proteus, he wasn't sure about what to do. He figured, this man has raped my wife, or it was his intention at least, and she is so ashamed that she doesn't know what to do anymore. She came to me in distress. Please help me. Please make sure we get rid of this man. But Proteus wasn't sure about how to do it, how to go about it. He couldn't just go to Bellerophon and say, here are the accusations, and now we kill you. Instead, he sent Bellerophon to the kingdom of Lycia, another one of the kingdoms outside of modern-day Greece, also in what is now modern Turkey, and a bit further towards the north, the Middle East. And he gave him baneful tokens, gravings in a folded tablet with many signs and deadly. And that is the part where we're going to look into in more detail for the murder mystery part of this masterclass. Because what exactly are baneful tokens graved in a folded tablet with many signs and deadly? It means something like Bellerophon got a message, but he couldn't understand the message. It's highly likely that it was written in some sort of secret code, or maybe in a language that, or maybe in a language that Bellerophon did not understood. But Proteus and his father-in-law, the one he sent Bellerophon to, they might have had their ways of discussing things that other people could not understand. And Proteus bade Bellerophon to show these to his own wife's father, that he might be slain. So Bellerophon is sent to the other king, the king of Lycia, with this message that reads something like, this man disgraced your daughter, please help me get rid of him. So Bellerophon went his way to Lycia under the blameless escort of the gods, showing that the gods are still favoring him. Bellerophon is still in the good books of the gods because he did nothing wrong. It was Antaea, the queen, who came to her husband and said, that man was seducing me, coming to me against my will. But of course, that was not true. And the Olympian gods, they would always see anything and everything. They knew what was right or wrong. Think about it, say, for example, a comparison could be Santa Claus, or in the Netherlands where I'm from, there is Sinterklaas, which is a bit similar. Santa Claus or Sinterklaas, they know exactly which kid was good this year and which kid had been bad that year. The good kids, of course, get a present. The ones who are bad and naughty, they won't get a present. And in that way, the Olympian gods were also so all-powerful, and they could see anything and everything, that they knew Bellerophon was in the right. And when Bellerophon was come to Lycia in the stream of Xanthus, then with a ready heart did the king of White Lycia, King Eubates, do him the honor. So Bellerophon came to King Eubates of Lycia, to one of the other kingdoms. Lycia was on the stream of the Xanthus, is what it said. The Xanthus was one of the rivers that went from the land of the living, so from our world, into the underworld. So it was one of the places where the Greeks believed if you had passed away, your spirit, as a sort of ghost, would go to the stream of the Xanthus, and from there it would be taken to the underworld. And this is a reference to the fact that things won't go so well for Bellerophon in the episodes of the story that are to come. But we can also see that things won't end so badly in the end, because at least the king did him honor, is how Omer describes it. The king was happy to take him in at first and to listen to his stories. And after several days of being there happily with a lot of hospitality, Eubates then asked Bellerophon to give him the token, to give him the message that he was supposed to give. How that happened is back in the day for the Greeks, they had a concept known as xania, or guest friendship is how we literally translate it. Xanos in Greek means foreign, and philia means love or friendship. So xania is the idea of guest friendship. When anyone came to your home, you were supposed to take them in, feed them, give them a place to rest and bathe themselves. Sorry. And do anything that they wanted for some time before you would then finally come to the question, like, what actually brought you here? And that is because many messages were sent with messengers or couriers. You couldn't just call someone to discuss something, going there yourself to just say hi, to have a chat, to have a coffee, as we would do nowadays. Also wasn't so easy because communities were much smaller. Many people lived far away from each other. And especially if you were of higher classes, so nobility, like the kings and heroes and princes that we have here in the story, they would have messengers who would take a message, a written message, from one person to the other. So you would write your message, give it to a messenger, and that person would then take it to the recipient. And probably they had been traveling for very many days. That is what would happen back in the day. So what would then happen is that you would first give the person some time to rest and relax and eat before you would then ask what was the purpose of their visit. In the case of in the case of Bellerophon and Eubates, it is said that there was a feast for 9 days before Eubates then finally asked Bellerophon the purpose of his visit. And when Eubates had received the evil token, so he got the message, he opened it and read it, and he was able to read the signs, the tokens. At this point, we're not yet sure what it is. But it must have said something like, make sure you find a way of killing this man because he has abused your daughter. And when Eubates reads the message, he gives Bellerophon a number of tasks. In fact, he gives them the task to kill a number of monsters, believing that he will never survive any of those tasks. But think of the other heroes. Achilles, Odysseus, Hercules. They all slayed one monster after the next. Hercules even got 12 tasks, 12 labors, and he completed all of them. Because when you are chosen as a hero, as a heroic figure in Greek myth, that means that you will always remain one, and you will be victorious in the end, even though you might have a lot of trouble along the way. So Eubates told Bellerophon to slay the chimera. The chimera was a divine stock, not of man, but in the forepart of a lion, in the hinder a serpent, and in the midst a goat, breathing forth in terrible wise the might of blazing fire. So the chimera was a mythological monster, and what we often see with mythological monsters is that they are made up of various parts and elements of various creatures, like a part of a lion, the front part a lion, the back part a serpent, within the midst a part of a goat, very much like say dragons, for example, breathing fire, monstrous figures. Or think of a sphinx or a griffin, or if anyone knows of any other mythological characters, please share it with us. So the chimera was a monstrous figure, but Bellerophon slew the monster easily, trusting in the signs of the gods, knowing that the gods were on his side. Next, he fought with the Solymi, which were a whole tribe that were invading Lycia. So one man fought against the whole tribe, and again he was victorious because he was the hero Bellerophon. And this, it is said, says Homer, was the mightiest battle of warriors that he ever entered. As a hero, as a soldier, he had been in many battles before, but this was the mightiest and biggest, and even though he was on his own, he defeated a whole army. When King Eubates saw that after so many quests, Bellerophon was still happy and healthy, and he had slain all the monsters, Eubates then decided to set an ambush, because he still had to find a way of getting rid of Bellerophon, still believing that Bellerophon had actually done something to his daughter, abused his daughter. But none of them returned home, for Pyrrhus Bellerophon slew them one and all. So even the ambush that was set up by the king, Bellerophon figured out what was happening, and he was victorious. Eubates then knew that Bellerophon was the valiant offspring of a god, and that he was not, that he did not commit the crimes that Proteus was accusing him of. He kept Bellerophon with him in Lycia, offered him his own daughter, another daughter, and gave him half of his kingly honor. So Bellerophon became the next king of Lycia, after being sent to the king of Lycia with a message that sort of foretold that he was going to die, but the tokens were many and strange and in a weird language, as we saw. The lady bare was had of Bellerophon 3 children, Isander and Hippolochus and Laodamea. So they had 3 children, and they lived happily ever after in the end. But what we do see here is, in fact, a sort of a complot to murder someone. With Queen Anthea coming to her husband saying, "This man has abused me against my will, do something about it." And the king then saying, "We need to kill this man," because the punishment for abusing a woman against her will was definitely death penalty. Can we just see if there are any questions or comments so far? I hope it's all still going well. Yes, we see some questions and comments. Let's see what we got here. I used to teach Nabatean Greek mythology to tourist guide in Jordan for 16 years. Oh, that's wonderful. I'm sure you enjoyed it. I also very much enjoy talking to the talking to larger audiences, not just doing the work at the university that I do, but also just talking to the larger audience and sharing anything with anyone is interested. Artemis and Achilles, yes, Artemis, twin sister of Apollo. They were the god and goddess of music and healthcare. Artemis is also related to children and being a virgin. She asked her father Zeus if she could please never get married because she wanted to remain a virgin and a young huntress in the forests. Achilles was not a god, but a hero, of course, a heroic figure from the Trojan War. But a hero for the Greeks was a figure who was half man, half god, in fact. And Achilles' mother was Tethys, who was one of the goddesses of the sea. And because Achilles was half god, was what made him so powerful and so strong. Good evening from Jordan. That's wonderful. Good evening. Thank you. Yes. All right. If anyone has further questions or comments at any point, we will keep an eye on the chat, of course. Let us now continue with our story, and we go to some of the activities. King Proteus of Tyrants, already one of the kingdoms in the Near East, because we saw that at this point Bellerophon had already left his hometown in Greece, took Pegasus, a flying horse, a horse that we see in a number of stories, and then he ended up there in Tyrants. Accused by the king of raping her, but it was not true. Still, Proteus wanted to get rid of Bellerophon. And we can't be sure of the fact that we can't be sure of if Proteus was actually believed his wife, or there were other reasons why he just wanted to get rid of Bellerophon. We know one of the reasons he had personally to dislike the figure was that Proteus believed that Bellerophon, in his own home city in Greece, was becoming too important and well-known and powerful, and he also saw that in a way as a threat. So maybe he also had his own personal grudges against Bellerophon, and that was also one of the reasons why he wanted to kill him. Yes, I already mentioned the idea of xenia, guest friendship or hospitality. And where that idea comes from is what we see here in this picture. This is a painting by Peter Paul Rubens, a Dutch artist from the 17th century. And what we see here are two gods, Zeus with his son Hermes, coming to an old couple, just a couple of mortals. The old couple didn't have much, as you see. They're from a fairly humble background. They probably have a little bit of farmland. They have some fruits on the table and the goose that she is feeding. And probably one day the goose will also be eaten because they do not have much. What we see in this story is that after Zeus and Hermes had been traveling the world for a long time, looking for anyone who wanted to take them in, many people actually refused since they didn't want to let in the two weary travelers, not knowing that they were actually gods. But this old humble couple, although they were poor themselves, they were very happy to take in the two gods and share with them anything they wanted to have. What the couple noticed at some point was that the food never ended, and the wine, and The goose got bigger and fatter, and there were even better grapes on the table and other kinds of fruit and other types of food and drinks. Just more and more kept coming, and the couple didn't understand what was happening until much later, after the meal. The two figures, the two travelers, revealed that they were actually the gods Zeus, here the older man, and Hermes, or Mercury as the Romans call him, behind him, showing that they were so happy because of this idea of hospitality, this gesture of hospitality, even though the couple said that they didn't have much themselves. They took in the travelers and gave them whatever they could offer. And that brings the idea of xenia, or guest friendship, to the Greeks. This story was to let the Greeks know that the gods and goddesses are always very close to us and always around us. Make sure when there is a god or goddess around, you can't really know when they are around, of course, but they could always be around at any point. So please do make sure that you always open your door to anyone, whether you know them or they're a stranger. Please let them in, since they might be a god or goddess in the end in disguise. And if you close the door for a god or goddess, then things probably will not end so well for you. So this story, the story had a sort of moral and a sort of lesson for the ancient Greeks to please remember to always be hospitable to anyone, even if you don't know them. If anyone would like to share anything, what do you think of this idea of hospitality? Please share it in the chat. And then in a moment, I will go back to the chat. Bellerophon got the message that he received on a wax tablet. Wax tablets back in the day looked like what we see here. Two pieces of wood, sort of carved out of it, and then a layer of wax was put on top. And then here, with this spiny thing known as a stylus, or a sort of pen, we would call it, one would scratch a message into the wax. Then you would fold it and close it, and then you could take it to the recipient. It wasn't always taken to the recipient. Such tablets were also used, say, for writing exercises at schools back in the day. And because it was wax on top, you could keep reusing it. Just flatten it out, add a bit more wax, and then you can use it again. Very much like a blackboard. It's a bit old-fashioned these days, but blackboard is where you used to scribble on it with chalk. Then you swipe it off, and you could reuse it. Or these days with a whiteboard, of course. So the sealed writing tablet had evil signs that indicated something like, kill Bellerophon, kill this man who has abused your daughter. So Bellerophon was carrying his own death sentence without knowing. Does anyone want to share what you would do in that way, in that regard, in that situation? You're carrying your own death sentence without knowing. Or maybe you do know. What would you do? Please share anything you like. And please also add to it, if in this case you already know that it is a death sentence or you don't know yet. We'd love to hear your thoughts, of course. This is probably not actual ancient code, like something that was completely ununderstandable, but it was written in a secret language, which means it was a language other than Greek, so a language that Bellerophon himself did not speak or read. Sorry. And that is something called as steganography, hidden writing. From Greek staganos, think of a stegosaurus as, for example, the dinosaur, also related to this word, in fact. Staganos meaning covered, and graphein in Greek means to write. Steganography is the simplest form of coding. And that is, you write something that is secret, you want to keep it secret from someone else, but it is literally covered and hidden, and that's why no one can see it. Think of it as I take a piece of paper and I put it under my clothes so that you can't see it anymore. And that is literally how it also worked with the wax tablet. Probably something was written on the wax that Bellerophon could not understand. Another similar story actually mentions a man called Demaratus of Sparta who wrote a secret message under the wax of the tablet. Does anyone like coding, writing messages, say in other types of scripts? Please share anything you like. And let me go back to the chat for a moment to see if there are any further comments. Pretending. 17th century portraits expect Greek mythology and goddess stories, according to the artist who had painted the portrait. Yes, very good. Portraits expressed in Greek mythology, according to the artist. Yeah, very good. We see it a lot, especially in the 16th and 17th century, the Renaissance. That's when we see a lot of these messages. A lot of these stories from back in the day, mythological stories, actually becoming inspiration for a number of artists, say painters like Rembrandt and Rubens, but also sculptors, artists, yeah. And even if we go a bit further throughout time, think of Van Gogh and Rodin, for example. They were also fascinated and inspired many times by ancient stories. And so was Shakespeare. Like, we also see it in writers from the 15th to 18th centuries. Let us have a look at some ancient scripts and see in what kind of language the message was probably written. And here you could also take your pens and pencils and papers because we're going to do some exercises. In various regions around the world, we see cave paintings, which is the earliest form of drawing and writing in a way, starting over 40,000 years ago. Cave paintings, although there were paintings rather than written messages, also told stories. Like what we see here, the figure in the middle holding a sort of spear is hunting these animals around him. And the other figure here with the bow and arrow is shooting the deer or the hart. So early cave paintings are considered as the earliest forms of written communication, even though there were, more like images rather than images or pictograms rather than script. But it is the earliest form of communication that goes back to over 40,000 years ago. Has anyone visited maybe any of these places where you can still find the early cave paintings? Please share in the chat. Going back to the actual first forms of writing with a sort of alphabet as we know it, goes back to Mesopotamia around 3,000 years BC. So the first forms of actual writing are about 5,000 years old. How that worked was with clay tablets. So here you can take out your soap or your Play-Doh if you have any, but you can also just do it. You can also just do it on paper with a pen or a pencil. You would take a tablet of clay, a block of clay, and again with the stylus that we see here, yeah, we see a lot of scribbles made into the tablet. Cuneiform, cuneus in Latin is the name of this. Cuneus in Latin is the name of this pointy, yeah, pointy tool that was used to create the messages that look a bit like, say, nails. In Dutch, we call it, in fact, spijkerschrift, nail writing. Because if you look at the wider top and then it becomes pointy at the end, it does look a bit like nails, in fact. And here on the right, we can see how it worked. So now it's time for a little exercise. I will give you a couple of minutes. Yes, here we have a cuneiform alphabet. Cuneiform wasn't literally an alphabet as we know it nowadays, but this more or less represents. Here we see the signs that more or less represent what are the letters in our modern alphabet nowadays. So I shall give you a couple of minutes. I shall, leave the screen here, of course, as large as possible. Please try to write your own name or write a simple word like hello or goodbye. You will see that not every letter appears in this alphabet. Oh, sorry. No, in this case, it is actually all right. Sometimes with cuneiform alphabets, we see that not every sign appears as it is in our modern 26-day letter English alphabet. So yeah, please try to write your name, for example, or a word, or maybe your partner's name, or the children, or anyone you like. Let me go back to the chat in the meantime to see if we have any further comments. Oh, sorry. Yes, the cuneiform alphabet, and let me go back to the chat. No, I don't see any further messages, but yeah, so let's go back and I will enlarge the screen for you again. I visited Bhimteka in India, which is cave paintings from Mesolithic period. Oh, wow. That goes very far back. Mesolithicum, the Middle Stone Age, is the period in which we see stone tools were being used for the first time. That is even before the time when we see the first major civilizations, like the civilizations in Mesopotamia. Oh, that is wonderful. I'm sure the cave paintings there were also very interesting and unique, because what we see with cave paintings is that they often represent what the surroundings looked like for the people back in the day, the people who lived there. Again, if you would like to share your cuneiform messages, please try to take a picture, and you can always add it in the chat. I'm also, of course, very happy to share anything like this later after the presentation, so you can still continue with your messages. So in my case, Martina, we would start with the letter M, A, R, T, I, N, and E. In fact, I did this. I did the kind of exercise like this when I just started my studies. There was a sort of introduction day in which they also wanted to show the fun parts of studying ancient history. It's not only just looking at old dusty books all the time. One of the activities we did actually on this introduction day was to try to write your own name in cuneiform. And that's how I remember that some letters don't always represent, some signs don't always literally represent letters that we have in the normal modern day alphabet. I hope those of you who wanted have created your cuneiform messages. So let us continue and have another look at scripts. Around 3000 BC, we see the first written messages appear in Mesopotamia with the cuneiform script. Around the same time, we see hieroglyphics appear in Egypt. Hieroglyphics is an interesting kind of script, since it is considered as a combination of pictograms, as we see here in the picture, and also an alphabet. And here we have the the hieroglyphics alphabet. Again, we shall take a few minutes. If anyone would like, please try to write your name using the hieroglyphic images. And don't worry if you're not a master at drawing, neither am I. But yeah, if you like, you can try. So in my case, again, Martine, we would have an L here, the M, the vulture, the letter R, the I, the A, the vulture, and here the I, letter R, T, the half moon, the I are 2 slashes, N, this represents water or a river. It's very much like, say, how children, when they learn to draw and write, how they would represent water. And then the E is part of a papyrus plant. Again, I shall give you a moment to look at this while we check the chat. Yes, I'm hoping people are trying to write their own messages. Hey there. So, yes, well done. So you already wrote it. Did you write it in cuneiform or in hieroglyphics, if I may ask? Or does anyone know any other ancient scripts, maybe? Anything else you'd like to share? All right. Well, again, I will be happy towards the end to share this again share this again so you can continue with your messages, your secret messages, or maybe not so secret, but consider the fact that an ancient script like hieroglyphics or cuneiform, it took the modern Europeans a long time to figure out how the scripts actually worked. So a secret script can in a way be a script that you don't know. Say, for example, I cannot read Chinese characters because they're so completely different from our alphabet. So for me, the Chinese script, for example, is also a secret script in a way. But then what we see, like with the message of kill Bellerophon because he has abused your daughter, we see that it was very likely that that was even a secret message in a better known script. Hieroglyphics is a combination of pictograms and an alphabet, which makes it very difficult, in fact, for us. Since but, the sign but, can mean two things: the complete word for Bart or the letter A. It's with the context only that you can figure out what if it's the letter or the complete word. That is rather difficult for all of us, of course. So, but luckily, later, after these pictographic scripts like the hieroglyphics, we see that eventually our modern day alphabet develops. And that was introduced into Europe in the 8th century BC by the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians had an empire that, spanned from parts of the Middle East to, all the way along North Africa to Tunisia, where they had the capital, Carthage. You might have heard of Carthage. The Romans at some point fought a number of wars against Carthage, the so-called Punic Wars. But the Phoenicians, they were merchants, travelers. They traveled around the ancient Mediterranean world. They traveled the seas. They were seafarers, in fact. And they came so they came across different types of languages and scripts when they were there visiting various new places. And they, in fact, introduced an alphabet, which was a simplified form of all these various scripts and languages that they saw coming together. Phoenicians originally came from Sidon here in the Middle East. That's around 800 BC. They have large parts of North Africa, the south of Spain and Portugal, and even some of the modern Italian islands. And they sailed all across the Mediterranean and went even further for, merchant purposes as well. As we see her here in this picture, where some men come from the ship, and they are sort of valuing what they are seeing. The man here with the red turban, is pointing at armor and pottery, like what he has by his feet, showing the other man, the Phoenicians, please take this. It's very good quality and it's excellent for you. They're not yet so convinced. You see, they're looking at the items, picking them up, and really trying to see what was the value of these items. And and to do so in a proper way, they had to be able to, of course, communicate with those other tribes and other civilizations. They were also very good at fighting in wars, in fact. They fought a number of wars at some point against the Romans, the so-called Punic Wars. Punica in Latin gave the name Phoenicia, Phoenicians, later in English, because the Romans believed that the Phoenicians, especially those from the city of Carthage, were a serious threat for Rome. Because from the 8th to the 5th century BC, the Phoenicians were actually the ones ruling over the Mediterranean basin. And from the 8th century BC, we also see the Roman civilization growing more and more, and that started clashing with the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians introduced the first alphabet in the world around 1300 BC already. From about 800, this alphabet was also introduced around parts of Europe. Again, I will give you a moment to have a look at this Phoenician alphabet so you can try to write your name in Phoenician characters. What we see here is that we already see various signs that look a bit like our modern letters. This looks a bit like a B, although it's flipped. This one looks like gamma, the third letter of the Greek alphabet. Later in English, it became C. This one looks like delta, or our letter D. And here it, goes on. Not all the letters are there, not all the letters from our modern alphabet. And as we see, some letters are also a bit different. So here, under the H, there is this little sort of dot. And here, what looks like the O for us actually represent a sort of apostrophe. And those small additions to letters is what we still see in, say, for example, various scripts in Eastern Europe. But what we can see is that at least every letter, every sign here represents just one letter and one sound. And that is what an alphabet actually is. A system of writing whereby every letter is one sign with one sound. And when you put the letters together, you can create words and sentences. And that's quite different from, say, a pictographic script like the hieroglyphics, but also Chinese pictograms, for example, where complete images can represent complete words or concepts, or sometimes even complete sentences. Great civilization, Hibet. Thank you. Which one is a great civilization? You mean definitions? I think they are quite. I think they were a great civilization. They're one of the lesser known civilizations, in fact, when you look at the ancient Mediterranean civilizations, but they have been very influential when it comes to, say, spreading literacy with this idea of an alphabet. All right, let us go back to the presentation. Yes. This Phoenician alphabet formed the basis for a number of other alphabets in Europe and the Middle East, in fact. And I'm sure you knew many of them. The first is Aramaic, for example, which in the Middle East formed the basis, in turn again, for Hebrew and Arabic. So anyone here who might know Hebrew or Arabic, you will probably recognize some of these signs, because Aramaic in turn again formed the basis for these other more modern scripts. The Greek alphabet, ancient Greek, and still the same used in modern Greek for anyone who knows Greek. And then the Armenian alphabet, completely different from other alphabets within Europe. Let me just move this to the side so you can see it. Completely different from any other alphabet in Europe. But what we do see are the small signs like this chi, he, very much a bit like the scribbles that we saw in the image of the Phoenician alphabet. And then our modern English alphabet, or actually we should say Latin alphabet, because what we use nowadays is the Latin alphabet. Did anyone know that actually, that there's no English alphabet? We use the Latin alphabet. Or what alphabets do you use? Maybe anyone here who knows, say, Hebrew or Arabic or other scripts? What alphabets do you use? Early Latin is where it started. So one of the scripts that came from Phoenician was Early Latin. That was used in the 6th century BC. So quite some time before Rome became a major civilization. And we see that quite a few letters are still missing from our modern alphabet. Early Latin, in fact, is only 20 letters, because J, U, W, and X, Y, and Z were still unknown. Classical Latin in the 1st century BC, the time of figures like Caesar and Cicero, maybe at school at some point you read some Caesar and Cicero either in English or in in English translation or in the original Latin. In the classical Latin alphabet, we see that the letters X, Y, and Z are now added, since those were added coming from the Greek alphabet. Since in this period we see more and more interaction between Rome and Greece. And our complete modern alphabet was finalized in the late Middle Ages, in fact, the 14th, 15th century, when we see that I and J become two separate letters. Before that, they only had the letter I. And U, V, and W also all become three separate letters. Before that, there was only the sign for V. It was pronounced most likely in Latin as an U, a U, but it's only in the late Middle Ages that V is seen as one letter separated from U and W. Does anyone know of any scripts that they are familiar with in which there were also such these kind of developments? Please share anything in the chat, and of course in a moment I will check it again. The wax tablets. What kind of message was written on the wax tablet? Tablets made of wood or sometimes of ivory, in fact, with a recess. What was the filling? With the recess, the part it was sort of scraped out, filled with wax, were very common for writing support in the ancient Mediterranean world. With a sharp stylus made of wood, metal, or bone, so either could be used to scratch signs in the wax. Well, if a mistake was made or the text was no longer needed, it could quite easily be erased by flattening it off and adding more wax. In this case, it's fairly easy. If you make a mistake or you don't need the text anymore, that is alright. But think of ancient inscriptions, texts that are actually chiseled into rock. Think of, for example, Greek or Roman tombs or sort of plaques on the street saying this building was erected by so-and-so because by Emperor Augustus because he donated the money for the building. What we see in inscriptions is that the scribes actually made mistakes sometimes. Poor guys. And if we are typing on a computer these days, or maybe on the phone, if you see you make a mistake, you just erase it, you just go back, and then you correct the text. But once the letter has been chiseled out into a piece of stone or rock or marble, then it's there and there's nothing you can do about it anymore. Fun fact, what we do see with such inscriptions is that sometimes you can actually see that the scribes made mistakes, but also that they try to correct it. As say if they wrote a letter B, but it was actually supposed to be a P, then you would see that they would try to chisel out the lower bit of the B to still make it look like a P. But it would still, of course, still be very much visible that you made a mistake. It's like writing with pencil, then you can still fairly easily erase it if you make a mistake, to get an eraser and try it again. But again, if you write something with pen, like ballpoint, and you make a mistake, it will be very easily visible in a written text. Tablets could be joined together in pairs, like we saw at the beginning with the images, or even larger sets in a kind of book. And that is what we see here in the reconstruction. Wood, or in this case, it looks more like cardboard, just for the reconstruction, filled up with wax, and then the stylus to scratch the letters into the wax. Wood, ivory, and wax are all perishable materials, and that's why many of the tablets did not survive in most places around the ancient Mediterranean. Because of the climate. Yeah, for clay tablets in the Near East and Bronze Age Aegean, or stone inscriptions in the Greek and Roman period. So that's why we don't have so many wax tablets that are left, because this wood and the wax are very perishable materials, unlike stone inscriptions. However, there are places, say Vindolanda in the north of England, which was a Roman military camp from the 1st century BC. There we actually have a lot of writing tablets that have survived, because the soil in the north of England is so cold and wet and damp that in the soil it actually preserved very well. So what we see with these kinds of perishable materials, sometimes when the soil is wet and it's cold, or in desertous areas, when it's so hot that it sort of got carbonized, that's when we see that perishable materials sometimes survive, while in most parts of the Greek and Roman and Near Eastern territories, many of the writing tablets sadly have not survived. What we see here is, an image from ancient Mesopotamia showing two scribes with the styluses and the booklets. With the one here in the middle, you see very well actually how the two parts are bound together in the middle. Let me just go back and see if there are any further comments in the chat. Aramaic was the official language in old civilizations like Nabatean. Yes, thank you very much. That is true. I am reading out some of the comments because I know they were shared via various platforms, so maybe not everyone can see all the comments. In India, we use the Devanagari script. Oh, wow, that sounds interesting. I'd love to hear more about that. What kind of script is that? Could you share a bit more, please? Here we see an image from ancient Greece. It may look like this guy is holding a laptop, actually, with the part flat and then the other part standing up as if he has opened up the laptop. But he's actually holding the tablet, not vertically, but he sort of flipped it horizontally to have two larger parts to write on. But this is one of those images that are used for ancient world-inspired memes that say that this guy had the first computer in the world. Yeah, and maybe he was making calculations. That would be possible, of course. We don't know, but he is in fact holding a wax tablet. And here a quite well-known fresco from Pompeii, probably representing the poetess Sappho. Sappho was a Greek poetess from the 6th century BC. There are very few female poets that we know from back in the day, or female writers in general. But we know Sappho was a poet who came from the Greek island of Lesbos, and she wrote a lot of love poetry. And this fresco from Pompeii very likely represents Sappho. A fresco is a technique of painting whereby you first paint a wall. You cover it in white chalk or gypsum, and when it is still wet, you then start painting into it. Fresco in Italian means fresh. When the wall painting, the literal wall painting, is still fresh and wet, that is when you start painting into it, and that technique is called fresco. What we see here is that she is holding the stylus as if she's thinking about what to write. And in her other hand, she's holding this sort of booklet of wax tablets. We see here that she has at least 4 or 5 on top of each other. Evidence for the use of wood and ivory writing tablets spans from Mesopotamia to Anatolia, which is modern day Turkey, from around 2100 BC into the classical Greek and Roman world, and even far beyond, in fact. You may think that this is something modern, but maybe there are civilizations around the world where this type of writing tablets were still used up to fairly modern day. Again, if anyone has any ideas, any examples from where they come from, please do share with us. In fact, the use of writing boards only ended about 150 years ago, when they were still used to keep records on the fish market in the French town of Rouen until the 1860s. Just a fun fact to share to show you that writing tablets have been used for a long time. And probably something that came out of this when we look at record keeping at the fish market is something like writing your own shopping list, something that many people still do nowadays. The writing boards were very durable as an everyday writing material, and the durability made them useful for conducting business outside of the home or documenting potentially messy industrial activities. They were fairly decent and durable for quite some time, although over thousands of years. Like we said, they were perishable materials in the end. But when they were used back in the day, they could be reused for a number of times. Sorry. So the Greeks and the Romans were actually very good already at recycling. Experiments that are conducted by the so-called Writing on Wax project shows us that beeswax, when mixed with ochre, orpiment, and charcoal, retains a pliable surface suitable for writing. So experiments were actually conducted to figure out what kind of wax and what kind of substance would be usable for these messages. Here we see it ochre to give it a yellow color. Orpiment is an arsenic sulfide mineral that gives wax a sort of golden appearance. And here, charcoal. I'm sure you all knew what that is. The use of these pigments is known from ancient wax writing board recipes. In fact, we have actual wax board making recipes from back in the day, where the ones who would create, or the ones who would make the writing boards, already shared that these are the best types of wax to be used. Also interesting, something that people might wonder, when these mixtures are used, the wax does not melt, even at the high Mediterranean summer temperatures, but that is only when the wax is mixed with these other elements, the ones we just saw. And that is something that has been tried out just as a way of trial and error over time, up to the point that the Greeks found the right way of writing. Ochre and orpiment made a sort of white or yellowish wax, and the charcoal made it black, of course. Here we see what is left of an actual writing tablet that was found. With here in the middle, we see that the parts to put them together, were actually quite big and strong. In the classical Greek and Roman world, we have more surviving tablets whose text can actually be read than we do from the ancient Near East. So the place where Bellerophon went with his message, he went to Lycia in the Near East, coming from Tyrians, already another kingdom in the Near East. In Greece and Rome, from Greece and Rome, we have many more actually surviving tablets than, from the Near East. They were used for all sorts of, purposes, from school exercises to legal documents. And there was one school exercise that we know actually from Rome and Egypt, with a wax tablet with the teacher's text being above, copied twice by a pupil below. Let's have a look at that one. We see it here. A text in the Greek script. Greek was mainly used already by the higher classes in Rome, but also in parts like Greece and Egypt. Even though they were under Roman rule, they rather used Greek than Latin script. So we see it here at the top. The teacher has written the sentence, and here the student tried to copy it twice. Can anyone remember those exercises from school days where the teacher writes something, or maybe you have an exercise book with something written in between the lines to show you how exactly the A is formed and then the B is formed? Would anyone like to share anything about how that went back in the day at school? Let me just go back to the chat again. For a moment to see if we have any further comments. No, all right, not yet. Well, then we'll just move through a few more things and then we shall end the talk. Yeah, for the final part, going back to our story, we see here the tablet that we already saw before, with here an interesting detail. It's enlarged a little bit here, and that actually looks like the form of a bee, showing that beeswax was used, as the type of wax for the tablets. And also probably to as a way of explaining to children who would use these tablets as sort of exercise books, that the wax they were using actually came from the bees, as a way of sort of thanking the bees. And then 2 small holes in one leaf, and a small depressed area and a hole in the inner margin of the opposite. Originally accommodated a fastening device for holding the 2 leaves tightly together when it was not in use. Let's just go back here. Here we see the part in the middle, quite sturdy, so you could easily fold it when you did not use it. The bee here, it's something we don't see in many wax tablets, but I think it's a nice small detail. Here we see it in a bit of a larger image. This is how a bee was depicted by the Egyptians, but also later by the Greeks. And here I see it's a bit vague when you enlarge it. Is the actual part where we see the bee in the tablet. This tablet was found in the Oloburen shipwreck, found near the coast of Turkey. You might have heard of the Oloburen shipwreck, a very old shipwreck that was found in a very decent state, actually, if you would look at it compared to other ships, because not so many shipwrecks that go all the way back to Greek and Roman times were found. It's unknown if that ship had been to Egypt, but if so, there might have been Egyptian writing tablets on it too, because a number of writing tablets were in fact found. There is a lot of discussion on the text on the tablet since antiquity. And that is what was written. So yeah, for the now final part, let us just go back to the actual part of what was written. What was that secret message? Was it a matter mystery? Was it a clear text? Something like, kill Bellerophon, get rid of him, or we have a problem because he has raped my daughter. Does anyone have any thoughts? What do you think was written on the tablet, and why was it written in that way? It could have been some sort of code as well. Was it written in pictograms, signs, hieroglyphics, or maybe cuneiform or Greek? Again, what do you think? Because a lot has been discussed about this passage in Homer and what was the actual message all the way back since antiquity. What do you think? Any ideas on what was written and in what script or language was it written? And yes, I will just go back here to the chat to see if there were any further ideas, and then in a moment I will share what I believe is most likely. The person who mentioned the Devanagari script, if you're still here, could you please share a bit more about what it was? What kind of script? Someone says we gave for number 3. Let's have a look at what that is. What was written? We go for number 3. We have a problem because Bellerophon has raped my daughter. Yes, that was very likely, and that was definitely the main message. The main message, the thing that had to be made very clear. All right, I will share what is most likely when we look at ideas from a number of scholars. Most likely, as the message was sent in secret, so Bellerophon knew that there was something written on it, but he didn't really know what it was. So in a way, the message was sent in secret, in a language other than Greek, because it was sent in the Near East from Tyrants to Lycia, so from 2 city-states in the Near East. And that is most likely why Homer describes it as baneful evil signs that were very hard to understand. But of course, we are still open to any questions, comments, or other ideas, because there was still actually a lot of discussion on what was actually written on those tablets and why. I think to conclude it, Proteus didn't really like Bellerophon, seeing him as a sort of rival, believing that he was becoming too important and too powerful. And that's why he just wanted to find a way of getting rid of him. And I also believe that it's most likely that the message was written in a script that he did not know, so it wasn't Greek. Or maybe what is more likely, in fact, is that Homer did not know the script because Homer was the one writing the story. But of course, we still do have some time before we end. So does anyone have any ideas? What do you think? What was written? Do you have any questions or comments? Or Patika, anything you would like to share?
Yeah, you were asking about the Devanagari script, so I thought I can inform you a little about it. So it's
Yes, please.
one of the many scripts that's used in India, and it's used for languages like Sanskrit, Hindi, and it's written left to right, top to down. And what is interesting is all of the vowels and some of the consonants have two forms in this script. One when they are used standalone, and when they are, and there's a different form when they are used with the consonants.
Oh, that is interesting. Thank you.
If anyone has any questions or comments, please let us know. And we do hope you enjoyed the session. I definitely did, and I wrote my name in many
Oh,
of
you
the
also wrote
scripts.
your name.
Yeah, of course, the bird is rather horrible the way I've drawn it, but other than that,
The
and this
bird
is
is
my
quite
name in the
difficult. Oh,
this
right.
is
And
my
even,
name in the Devanagari script.
okay, wow. Oh, that is nice.
And if you did write your names, if you were following along, please send us your pictures on it. Just send us a DM on Instagram, or you can also share it on your stories and tag Save Ancient Studies, and we'd love to see it.
Of course, if anyone had actually some sort of writing tablet, or maybe you used the clay or soup boss, we would love to see pictures of that as well. We have another thought. Secret language in a hidden paper, maybe. Yes, could be possible. Paper wasn't so well known back in the day. There was papyrus or parchment, but that is something that we see later, a bit later, in fact. But yeah, papyrus and parchment were used for writing. Papyrus mainly in the southern parts of the Mediterranean, so Egypt and North Africa, the rest of North Africa and the Middle East. Parchment, we see it more in the northern parts of the Mediterranean, also farther north towards Europe. But yeah, that's also a very good thought. A secret language. What do you mean secret language? In the way that Homer did not know the language, or that it was an actual secret language that maybe only Protus and that maybe only Protus and his father-in-law they knew about it. I want to see the donation QR code is there as well. Do you want to share anything about the donations, maybe?
So I think we are coming to an end of this session. And of course, if you enjoyed this event, and if you enjoy our other events, please consider donating for our birthday bash. It is one of the major fundraisers for SASA. So your donation would count a lot towards us. And we have many other events scheduled for this week. We have four other master classes and also a movie discussion on 4th of May. So you can check those out on our website. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And we hope you have a great day or night.
Have a good day.